Hello. Hi. Last time I did a talk to an audience your size, I was upstaged by Siri, who said he didn't have a clue what I was talking about. So today I'm going to prove him wrong. So the diversity business case is well documented, and I've got two favourite stories. One is of a very large software company that worked tirelessly to design a photographic app. And then when they launched it out into the market, they started receiving lots of complaints from people that had difficulty using this app. And the complaint, after they started investigating this complaint, it transpired that it was only left-handed people that were complaining. So they were scratching their heads trying to work out why on earth this app was difficult for left-handed users. Right-handed users were fine. And then they started to look at the team that made the app, and they decided they found that there were no left-handed people working on the team. So, story number one. Story number two is of the large consultancy firm EY, who they sent out teams to their clients, and they mixed the teams up, and they found out that the teams that were headed up by a female partner, or who had half of the team was females, got 30% better results for their clients. So in that sense, the diversity business case is incredibly well documented, and I've not yet met anyone that says diversity is bad for business. But the question that I keep coming back to when I talk to businesses is, why do businesses keep failing to meet their targets that they set? So the BBC, about a month ago, launched its new diversity and inclusion strategy, and we set some fresh targets. We said that 50% of the organisation would be female. We said that 15% would be people of a BME background, 8% would be people of disability, and also 8% people of an LGBT background. And I think one of the theories that I've got is that businesses are spending too much time looking at the wrong thing. They're looking at very tactical exercises. So they're running things, and all these things have merit, but they're running things like unconscious bias training, mental health awareness days or weeks, and they're sponsoring events. And they believe those are the things that are going to shift the needle in terms of diversifying their workforce. But what I've seen is that this leads to a temporary shift in diversity metrics and not really a sustainable change. I think what we need to see is that we need to see a behavioural change more towards inclusivity. So very often, we talk about diversity and inclusion. My job title includes diversity and inclusion, but quite often the word inclusion or inclusivity sometimes gets forgotten, and we focus a lot on the diversity, but not so much on the inclusion. And so organizations are spending a lot of time on kind of tactical awareness raising interventions or initiatives. So I'd like to tell you a story, this is a true story, about a time when awareness simply wasn't enough. Back in 2010, I got a chest infection, which is not that uncommon for me in the winter because of my disability. And as I always do, I go to the doctor and I got a course of antibiotics. And the antibiotics didn't work. I then went back to the doctor, got another round of antibiotics, and the second round of antibiotics didn't work either. I became really delirious. I couldn't keep any food or water down. And my carer at the time bribed me to go to hospital. And the bribe was, it was worth taking. So I did. I went to hospital. The next day, though, I slipped into a coma, and I spent 2 months in a coma in intensive care. And I got shipped between 2 different hospitals because the other hospital had a better intensive care unit. But in that time, I had multiple organ failure, I had a bleed on my brain, and I was on dialysis, and it got to a point where the doctor called my parents back into the hospital and said, we think this is, we've done all we can, and we don't believe that Toby is going to make it through another night, so you better come back into the hospital. Luckily I did. But in the course of that experience, I'd gained 10 kilograms, because in their wisdom, the dietitians of the NHS did a calculation that, bearing in mind I was just lying in bed doing nothing, said I needed 3,000 calories a day to stay alive, which meant I put on 10 kilograms. So I came out of hospital and I was like twice the size that I was when I went in. And I really wanted to lose the weight because, I was single. I wanted to find a boyfriend. It wasn't particularly good for my mobility. So I spent a lot of time trying to lose this weight. The thing is, I had the awareness of how to lose weight, but I wasn't necessarily shifting it until I went through a few things. So, I came up with a plan of how to lose weight. I started to use tools like MyFitnessPal to track calories. I created simple rules. I knew alcohol was bad for me, or excessive amounts of alcohol was bad for me. You still have to keep some of it in. I knew that for me, when I talked to dietitians, that eating refined carbohydrates for me was bad because I can't burn it off, and therefore if I can't burn refined carbohydrates off, then it gets converted into sugars and stored in the body. I knew that exercise was important. I can't really exercise, so I had to find other ways of balancing out, so that's when calorie counting came in. So I started to create these really simple rules. So I had a plan, I had a reason to lose the weight, I had some really simple rules, and basically now I weigh 48 kilograms, and I was 60 kilograms, so I've lost quite a lot. And that was an example of me taking or acting on awareness. So awareness wasn't enough, but I acted on it. I suppose what I was saying is that I incorporated my diet and my lifestyle into business as usual. And this is a shift that I think we need to make in terms of diversity and inclusion. A lot of time is spent on interventions that, in my opinion, have a short shelf life. But we need to get to a position where diversity and inclusion almost becomes like the plumbing of an organization and becomes business as usual, just like health and safety is today. So in that weight loss story, I needed 3 things. There's actually 8, but I don't have time to talk about 8, so I'm going to just cover 3. And if you want to know the other 5, then by all means come and talk to me. So I needed motivation, I needed to create some simple rules, and I needed tools. And these are the same 3 things that you need when you're trying to increase the amount of diversity and inclusion in your businesses as well. So the first one, motivation. The question that I like to ask is, find the one thing that matters to your business. So at the BBC, our mission and our vision, if you like, is to be the most creative organisation in the world. We thrive on ideas. Ideas are our currency. Now, when I talk to other businesses, they have different things that are important to them. Yesterday, I met with a lady from a legal firm. She said what's really important to them is their billings. So, for example, sit down with your executives and find out, what is the number one thing that is important to your business. It could be moral. It could be, we need to do this. This is the right thing to do. Our business needs to reflect the audience or the customer base that we serve. And it can be commercial, as in the case of the EY consultancy firm that I told you about. And once you understand that one reason that matters, you can then start to build a narrative around that. And that's when you can start to get everybody on board with regards to the diversity and inclusion piece of work that you're working on, or the culture. And then go around and ask your key stakeholders, what's in it for me? So it could be your customers, it could be your senior managers, it could be your junior staff, it could be your key suppliers, it could be your golden clients. So identify your key stakeholders and find out what's in it for them with regards to diversity and inclusion, and make it really personal. So when I talk to senior people at the BBC about diversity and inclusion, the ones that really get it and the ones that are like fully behind the agenda are those that have a personal connection with it. You know, they may themselves be from a minority group and have experienced times when they felt an outsider, and so they really get behind the whole mission. And then lastly, find out where you're finding the leaks, what I call the leaky pipe. So if we take like a really basic employee life cycle, if we talk about attraction and selection, and then recruitment, development and retention, in those kind of 4 areas, find out within your organization where you've got a leaky pipe, and where you're losing people, or where perhaps you're struggling to retain diverse talent. So I'll tell you a story about that. So when I started the project, I didn't really believe that the BBC had any leaky pipes, if you like, in terms of recruitment of people of a BME, so ethnic minority background. Our statistics, the area that I was working in is in technology. The statistics within technology was better than the industry average. It was pretty good compared to the rest of the BBC. So I didn't really believe that there was a problem. So we started working with a company called Gap Jumpers, which provides a platform for doing blind skills auditioning. So this is like the Voice television program, but for recruitment. And so what we did is we scrapped the use of CVs. So we asked our recruiters not to look at CVs when selecting candidates. And instead we used Gap Jumpers, which allows us to create a bespoke challenge for a particular hiring manager or team on a particular business problem. And we did it in the iPlayer team. And then we asked all the candidates to complete this challenge online. And the results started coming in. And what we found out was that people of a BME background were 3 times as more likely to be shortlisted for an interview if they took the blind audition as opposed to having their CV screened. And so this is one area of, this is an example of a leaky pipe. We had a leaky pipe with regards to selecting candidates in one particular area of the business. We also found out that actually women were not at a disadvantage when doing the blind auditioning. So we had different groups of people being affected differently at the recruitment stage. So the second area, so we've talked about motivation, and we've talked about looking at the leaky pipe and identifying those areas where you need to improve. The second area is around simple rules. And I think it's really important to create really simple rules with regards to fixing diversity and inclusion issues in your business. And the simpler you can make them, the better, because it means that everyone in your organization understands them. So some examples of simple rules that I've come up with are, for example, make sure your job description language is gender neutral. There's a fantastic tool called Textio You can paste your job description into the tool, and it will let you know whether the language used in that job description is towards the masculine or feminine end of the spectrum. And then you can click on certain words and change them. And it's a really great tool because there is evidence that suggests that if language used in a job description is particularly masculine, you're going to have fewer women applying for that job. And that's really important for the area that I work in, because one of the areas that I work in is technology, where we are underrepresented by the number of women working in that sector. Pushing back on all-male shortlists. Hold your recruiters accountable that if they present you a list of 10 finalists for an interview and they're all men, hold them accountable and say, hang on a minute, that's not acceptable. We expect around 30% of candidates to be women in the final shortlist. And having mixed interview panels. Mixed interview panels is a way of counteracting any implicit bias that's found in the interview room as well. So those are really 3 simple rules. 1, look at the language that you use in the job description. 2, push back on unacceptable shortlisting. And 3, have mixed interview panels. And they're really simple rules that anyone in the business can understand. And once you explain, they'll understand the logic behind it as well. The third area is tools. So I explained one of the tools that we used, gap jumpers. Gap jumpers, a way of doing blind skills auditioning. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to select tools that interrupt behavior, because ultimately, with diversity and inclusion, it's repeated patterns of sustained behavior that prevent or doesn't help with the diversity and inclusion agenda. So if you can come up with any tools or systems that basically interrupt those patterns of behavior, the better. And gap jumpers for us was the one that did it, because what we did is we completely changed the recruitment process. We said we are no longer going to consider candidates on a CV. We're going to ask them to prove that they have the skills needed for the task, and we're going to select them purely on merit without even understanding their educational background. And we got some really surprising results. We had, self-taught software engineers that had previously been rejected by recruiters because they didn't have the right background, that went straight to the top of the interview list. So I suppose in all of this, what we need to do is we need to move away from diversity as being a box-ticking exercise, and one where inclusion becomes business as usual. But if you really must refer to diversity, because a lot of businesses still want to talk about diversity, and if you're going to try and push the diversity agenda in your business, it's the language that seems to stick, then it's quite good to maybe swap diversity and talk about difference. Because difference comes in many forms. Because as a box ticker, I'm gay and I'm disabled. But actually, I'm slightly introverted, believe it or not. I'm process-driven, I'm a geek, and I'm very particular about how my wardrobe is organized. And actually, these things are the things that I can bring to an organization and actually make the biggest difference and the biggest impact in the work that I do. Thank you very much, and I can take your questions.